Welcome back to Luke's Properties YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to tell you a story about how I lost £2,000 from a nightmare rent-to-rent deal. Let's get into it. Okay, so let me take you back to 2018 when I had started my rent-to-rent business and I had secured my first rent-to-rent property. At this stage, things were going quite well. I had my proof of concept. I knew rent-to-rent worked. I was making money, and generally speaking, things were pretty good. But at this stage, I was still quite naive. Now, before I got my first rent-to-rent property, for around 3 to 4 months, I had been driving from London to Wales, speaking with estate agents, speaking with landlords, offering my services, and constantly getting told no. I faced lots of rejection before I eventually got my first rent-to-rent property. Now, even though I had been getting told no and facing lots of rejection, all of those phone calls, all of those letters that I sent, all of those meetings that I arranged, all those times I went into an estate agent's, sat down, and offered my services to them. None of that was pointless, because what it was actually doing was building relationships, building trust and rapport. I had become familiar with the estate agents. They knew who I was, they understood the services that I provided, they understood my business model, and I'd like to think at this point they had started to grow fond of me. So much so that a couple months after securing my first rent-to-rent property, I started to get offered properties from estate agents, which I couldn't believe at the time, because I spent so many months asking for rent-to-rent deals, asking to rent properties, facing lots of rejection. So to then be in a situation where, in complete contrast, I was now being offered properties from estate agents, I couldn't believe it. And because I was still quite naive and new to the business, I thought I had cracked it. And I started taking properties on without really doing my due diligence. I just presumed that all these estate agents were my friends. And because my first deal had worked out so amazingly well, I just presumed that every deal after that would be just as good. So an estate agent called me and they offered me a 5-bedroom HMO. And this 5-bedroom HMO was positioned above a kebab shop in the city centre. So I thought, fantastic. It's in the city centre. There's loads of businesses, loads of people in that area. It's not going to be hard for me to find tenants to pay me a premium price. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, how wrong I was. So I got someone to view the property for me on my behalf. The report that I got back was that the property was in good condition, it was in a good location, and it would be a good addition to our rent-to-rent portfolio. So without hesitation, I agreed on this 5-bedroom HMO, paid 2 months rent to the estate agent, and the following week, I went and collected the keys. Now, once I collected the keys, I went straight to the property with my team, which was a cleaner, my dad and my girlfriend at the time. We went to the property to prepare it. We normally do a full clean. We assess what needs to be added to the property. We assess how we can improve the perceived value with a cosmetic refurbishment. We assess where all the furniture is going to go. Then we order all of the furniture, all of the soft furnishings. We put it all together and then we market it. So that was the plan. We went to visit the property, and bear in mind, this is the first time that I've ever seen the property. Now, when we got to the entrance of the property, we opened the front door and immediately we were greeted by what I can describe as a wall of chairs. Around 20 to 30 chairs all stacked on top of each other like a barricade. So we couldn't get through the corridor and up the stairs into the actual property because of these chairs that were in the way. So that was the first red flag. I thought that was a bit strange. Why would you rent a property to someone and block the entrance completely? But I didn't think too much of it. We managed to squeeze past the chairs and get up the stairs into the property. Now, as I was walking up the stairs and I got to the first floor, I noticed a really strong smell of kebab coming from the restaurant below. Now, kebab isn't my favourite choice of food. I know for some people they really enjoy it, but it can smell quite greasy and it's not a very nice smell, especially in your home. I understand the shop and the restaurant smelling like that, but if we're going to be marketing this place for people to come and stay that are going to see it as their home, then if it smells like kebab the whole time, it's going to be a bit of a tough sell. So these are the things that I'm starting to think about in my mind, and this was the second red flag. Now, as we walked down the corridor, we started to assess some of the rooms. I went into the living room, started to assess where the furniture was going to go, and then I heard a scream from my cleaner. I followed the sound of the scream and I found my cleaner in one of the bedrooms. She was looking in shock at one of the beds where there was a gentleman laying there who had just woken up, and he gave her quite a shock. So it turned out that this gentleman was an employee who had been working in the kebab shop downstairs, and he obviously thought it was acceptable to just go upstairs and go to bed, which obviously for us was completely unacceptable, as we had paid for this property and as far as we were concerned, We were now renting this property for a year, so we weren't expecting anyone else to be there. I know my cleaner certainly wasn't expecting anyone to be there, let alone asleep in one of the bedrooms. So this was the third red flag for me, right? So I've got past the barricade downstairs, I've walked up the stairs, all I can smell is kebab, and then we found one of the employees from downstairs living in the property that we've just rented. So this was the third red flag for me. I went straight downstairs and I went into the kebab shop and I started to speak with the owner. I explained to him that there's a gentleman upstairs that I think works for him, and I asked him why he thought that was acceptable. His response to me was, I'm not going to do the accent and embarrass myself, but his response was along the lines of, the guy upstairs works here, he was tired, so he went and had a nap. What's the big deal? Now, rather than waste my energy arguing with this man, I realised quite quickly that he was going to be a nightmare to deal with, and he wasn't the right landlord for us to be working with. So I left the property and I went straight to the letting agency. I asked to speak to the letting agent that had offered us this property. He sheepishly came over and we had a conversation. Long story short, I explained the situation, I explained what had just happened, and I explained that I couldn't work with someone like this. I also said a few more things, but I won't say exactly what I said. And long story short, I gave the keys back to the property and I refused to pay any more rent going forward. I turned around and I left the estate agents. A couple days later, I received an email from the estate agent explaining to me that because I had cancelled the agreement early, I was going to lose my first month's rent and my deposit. Now for me at the time, this wasn't great news, but even though I was still quite new to the business, I was aware that I couldn't work with someone like that kebab shop owner. Because in order for my rent-to-rent business to work smoothly and efficiently, I need to have a good relationship with the landlord. And I just didn't feel like that was going to be possible working with this particular landlord. So I lost my deposit and I lost my first month's rent, which worked out to be £2,000. And in hindsight, that was a small loss compared to how much I could have lost for the rest of the year going forward. Because working with someone like that and working with a property like that would have been very difficult. And the chances are I wouldn't have been able to find tenants for the property. I would have been locked in to this contract where I'm paying £1,000 a month for a property that I can't rent out, which would have meant I would have lost a lot more than £2,000. So sometimes in life, in business, you have to cut your losses. Now there's lessons here to be learned. And some of you that are just starting out in rent to rent, you're trying to find your first rent to rent deal. You're probably still quite naive and new to the whole world of property. So I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I did. So let's summarize the actual mistakes that I made so that you don't make the same mistakes. So the first mistake I made was not viewing the property myself. Now you can get other people to view your properties, but I think in the very, very beginning, especially when you're taking on your first 1 to 3 rent to rent properties, you should really try and view the properties yourself. Especially if you're starting with limited capital, you can't really afford to make costly mistakes like this. Luckily for me at the time, I already had my first rent to rent property that was generating me £900 per month in profit. So I had some money coming in and I had a few £1,000s in reserves that I was saving to use for my next rent to rent deal. So this £2,000, it didn't bankrupt the business, but it could have. So rather than make the same mistakes I made, if you're just starting out, go and view the property yourself. The second mistake I made was not viewing when the kebab shop was actually open. So initially, when I got someone to view the property, they viewed it at around 9 o'clock in the morning, when the kebab shop was still closed. So they couldn't smell all the food being made from the kebab shop below because it wasn't open. So they thought it smelled great. So the mistake I made was not viewing the property when the kebab shop was actually open. So if you are viewing an HMO or any other property that's above restaurants or shops, try and view them around lunchtime when the restaurants are open. This will give you a better understanding of how the property smells, how the property looks at a different time of day, and if it's going to be able to work for your business. The third mistake was getting carried away. Because my first rent to rent deal had gone so well, at this point, I thought I was a professional. I thought I had cracked it. I got a bit ahead of myself. And I just thought that every deal that was going to come to me was going to make me money because the first one had. So I didn't have any negative experiences to draw from. I just thought everything was going to work because why wouldn't it? My first deal had gone so well. Why wouldn't every other deal go the same way? I thought all the agents were my friends. I was naive and quite green and too keen. In hindsight, I think some of these estate agents saw me coming because they knew I wanted to rent properties and because they knew I was quite new to the business. In hindsight, I feel like they could see me coming. And the truth of the matter is, not all estate agents are going to be your friends. Some of them may try and stitch you up. Some of them may try and give you stock that they're finding difficult to rent themselves. They're not all trying to do you a favor. Some of them are trying to give their bad stock to you. That way they can still get paid every month from the management fee. They still get paid for their tenant fine fee from the landlord without dealing with any of the problems. So it's a win-win for them. So don't make the same mistakes that I did. Learn from these mistakes and do better. Now, if you want someone to help you build your rent-to-rent business, someone who's been there and done it and lived through these horror stories, then I'll leave a link in the description below where you can book a call in with myself, and on that call we'll have a chat and we'll work out if we're the right fit for each other going forward. If we are, then I'd love to help you build your rent-to-rent business and avoid making these same mistakes. If you want to watch another video where I break down exactly how to get rent-to-rent deals from estate agents, then watch this video next. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.